Good evening. Are we on?
We are on and everyone has joined the room.
Good evening. I want to welcome you to the Wednesday, December 14th, 2022 regular meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission. Can I have a roll call, please?
Of course. Commissioner Alain?
Here.
Commissioner Irvin?
Here.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Maruzzi is excused. Vice Chair Roberts?
JR, you're muted.
Here.
I am present.
And Chair Womack?
Present.
6 members present. We have a quorum.
We are at the acceptance of the agenda, and there are a few items on the agenda I would like to go to. One is that we are going to continue 2C to a date certain. And item which is now listed as 3A is actually a public hearing, so that will become item 2D. Before we accept the agenda, I know that a few of the members of the commission wanted to make a statement as to the reasons that they would like to see this item continued. Commissioner Hirschbein?
Thank you. Planning Director Hedlund, maybe you can advise, because based on a conversation you and I had earlier today, were we going to do that now, or are we going to wait for the subcommittee?
I think it's at the discretion of the commission whether they wanted to state for the public record, any of the questions that were raised that I know the applicant is going to work to address. But I also think that could be addressed through a subcommittee and at the next meeting when this does come back. So I think it's up to you, Commissioner, if you want to put anything on the public record at this point.
Well, there were a couple of there's sort of an umbrella issue, and then there's specifics to that. And the umbrella issue is I don't believe the project complies with the intent of the general plan to provide credible public access space along Palm Canyon. And then there's some specific follow-ups to that. But I think the umbrella is that it would be difficult for me to make a finding that it complies with the intent of the general plan. And I look forward to working with the applicant to make sure that we get a project that will be a benefit to the community.
Did other commissioners have comments?
Madam Chair, if I may, before we continue this discussion, because this is a noticed public hearing item for this evening, I might suggest that we get to that item and actually open the public hearing in case anybody has something to say. And then if the commission would like to have its discussion and then continue the item, it's free to do so.
Very good. We will do it that way. Thank you. Okay, so can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
And that's with simply changing 3A to be 2D, so it's a public hearing.
Right.
Second.
All in favor?
Madam Chair, before we take the vote, can I just, Attorney Priest, I think that the commission's intent was to continue this item prior to the public hearing to a date certain. Are you indicating that we should open the hearing even if we are continuing it?
I would suggest that you open the public hearing in case anybody has comment they want to provide this evening, and then the commission can entertain a motion to continue the item to a date certain, which would then eliminate the need for any further noticing.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I?
And Chair, if I might just give my report on the posting of the agenda just for the public record as well, just so we have that, that it was posted on Thursday, December 8th in accordance with state law and city policy. So thank you.
Okay, this is, we are at public comments. This time is set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar and other agenda items and items of general interest within our jurisdiction. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. Testimony for public hearing may be offered at this time. Members of the public who would like to address the commission on items 1A are directed to comment under this portion of the agenda. If you are commenting on any of the public hearing items, 2A, 2B, 2C, or 2D, you can also do it at this time. Are there members of the public who would like to speak?
I see no members of the public wishing to speak.
Then the public hearing is closed and we are going to the consent calendar. There are 2 items on the consent calendar. One is the approval of the October 22nd, 2022 minutes, and then the November 9, 2022 minutes. I will recuse myself from I believe it is the November 9th meeting, as I was not in attendance. Is there a motion?
Chair, I would like to request just a one-word correction on page 4 of the October 12th meeting. The second line should read general plan rather than demo plan. If nobody else has any changes or corrections, then I would move approval of both.
I do have an amendment as well on page 3. I'm sorry, page 3 of the October 12th minutes, midway down the page, the word different in the second line should be driveway, I believe. It's referring to the driveway at the 12 at Las Palmas project, and it says different.
Are there any other comments on this? With those, does your motion include those changes?
It does.
I'll second it.
Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Land,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
Chair Womack.
Yes. Okay, moving right along. The first public hearing is 2A, Sunray Naturals LLC, seeking a conditional use permit for a cannabis cultivation operation within an existing 14,293 square foot building on a 6,080 square foot parcel, or with 6,080 square feet dedicated to grow operations to include transportation and distribution at 690 West Garnett Avenue, Zone 1P. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
Great. The application. So the application is requesting. Okay. So the application is requesting a conditional use permit for a cannabis cultivation operation that includes cultivation of 5,136 square feet and associated other activities, including a drying and trimming room and then a prep room for a total of 6,080 square feet. So the property located at 690 West Garnett is a 14,000 square foot building. Currently, half of the building is used by a cannabis dispensary called Bare Necessities. This was received its regulatory permit in 2017 and is currently operating out of half of the building. So Sunray is going into the second portion of the building, and I'll get to a floor plan in just a minute. But to orient the commission, this property is located south of the I-10 and north of Garnet Avenue in the north end of town near the interchange of I-10 and Indian Canyon. As was read into the record, the zoning is M1P, and it is located in the Cannabis Overlay Zone, which is an area of the city that is dedicated to or allows possible cannabis operations such as grow facilities and so forth. So looking at the site plan, which is included in your packet, it shows 41 parking spaces, which are currently there. The site plan won't change. The building exterior won't change. What they're proposing to do is to, convert a portion of the building with 3 grow rooms, and I'll point them out. There's a floor plan that we'll get to in just a minute that shows where in the building location of all these items are. So as I mentioned, there are parking spaces that are currently allocated for the dispensary and spaces that will be allocated for the cultivation, and they do meet all the parking requirements. As part of their city regulatory permit, the applicant needed to submit an odor control plan, which was approved by the city. Our consultant is available. Once I'm finished with my presentation, they'll be available to discuss and answer any questions the Planning Commission may have. So within the odor control plan, they are using industry standard carbon filters, a box within a box, meaning that there are new walls that are impermeable that will be placed within the grow facility areas, closed loop HVAC systems, other controls, and staff training. Project did go through an environmental review. An initial study was prepared by an outside consultant, Terra Nova Group, who was hired by the city. They looked at energy use, all the specific requirements for an initial study, and a negative declaration was determined in looking at the environmental review. Our city consultant from Terra Nova is available also for a discussion if the Planning Commission has any questions in just a minute at my end of my presentation. Within the environmental review, it looked at wastewater, water quality. The wastewater will be collected and hauled off site. They'll be using plumbing fixtures that use 25% less consumption. And the water demand, there was a letter from Mission Springs Water District that states that they will be able to serve the facility with its water. So looking at this drawing, once again, the overall building, there's dispensary, grow areas, and then the green areas, the licensed areas from the Sunray Naturals. Here also in your site plan is odor control mechanical equipment plan. This shows the carbon filters and the ducting that will be within the facility to contain odors and keep them within the building. There's also a mechanical equipment roof plan showing where the compressors and so forth will be on the roof. There's a parapet that runs around the building, and the mechanical equipment will not be visible from Garnet or from Interstate 10. So looking at the conclusion, staff feels that the findings that need to be met by the Planning Commission can be met. We recommend that you adopt the negative declaration per SEQA and approve the conditional use permit with conditions attached. So Chair, that concludes my report. And as I mentioned, Nicole Chris from Terra Nova is here, and also our city odor consultant is available.
I muted myself. Is the odor consultant available?
I am.
Jay, is there anything that you want to tell us about the odor control plan? Is it Is it up to current standards?
Yes, it went through several reviews in our office with a comment and response period that we had three separate submittals. Each time we made a set of review comments and they accepted them and made the changes and wound up with a fully developed odor control plan that looks good and meets all the recommendations and guidelines.
Thank you. And could we expect any odors to be emitted from the property?
No, in accordance with, it's a cultivation. It's got the 7-to-1. It's with proper maintenance, proper inspections, and proper operation. No, you reasonably should not expect odors to be emitted from the property.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there other questions for the consultant? Seeing none, thank you very much. Does anybody have questions for Nicole Christ on the negative declaration? Seeing none, we don't need to go into that. Are there any other questions of staff?
I have a question.
Proceed.
Glenn, you talked about box and box, and the architectural drawings are pretty limited. And there's just a couple notes about sealing, caulking any cracks. Is that what you were referring to?
Right. So the in the drawings that were submitted, there is a construction documents that show page A1.2, which shows the type of wall insulation that will be used within the facility to contain odors and light and water and so forth when they clean the rooms themselves. The applicant may be able to describe this better, or maybe our environmental consultant or noise consultant or odor consultant.
Yeah, I just don't see that on the drawing.
Yeah, if I could chime in, the box in a box is a little bit of legacy nomenclature for what the intent and goal was years ago during the beginning of this process. That was when the requirements allowed for the air moving components of the system to exist outside of the building. So we were more concerned with making sure we had dual layers of separation. Now that the requirements require the air moving components of the system be located within the building, the box in the box just doesn't exist anymore, nor does it need to, because all of the components that move air are kept within the space.
So sealing any cracks in the wall or openings that
all
are
of
being
that. Yeah, all of that is still required. Part of the requirements of the odor mitigation.
Wait, let me finish my question.
Sorry.
Thank you. So any cracks in the exterior wall or openings to the exterior that are being sealed, they don't need to be caulked, or there's no requirement because it won't leak out, the odor won't leak out?
The requirements of the odor mitigation requirements require the building to be kept under negative pressure. So if there was an allowable crack, that would be moving against the airstream. We also require the applicants to mandate that they seal the buildings in accordance with elevated Tier 1 standard codes under the green construction standards. So they do commit to sealing the building, and they do commit to making that space negative pressure, with the full intent that even if there was a crack in the building, that the pressure would be moving into the space as opposed to being pushed out of the space.
And is the pressure maintained 24/7?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff for the applicant? Commissioner Olayan.
Thank you. My question deals with the energy use during operation. In the environmental analysis, and I'm not sure if this is actually for staff or it's for Ms. Christ or who it's for, but in the discussion in the staff report about the environmental analysis, it indicates that the project is designed with energy efficiency. It's going to significantly reduce the energy demands compared with a standard cannabis facility. Then it goes on and it says it's going to do that in two ways. The first is to use carbon-free energy, which does not reduce the energy demand. And then secondly, it goes on and it discusses at length the what are they, double-ended high pressure sodium lighting and how this lighting is going to save energy. However, in the memo that we have from Synergy, they are talking about the same lighting and how much energy it's going to save. But it says that this lighting is standard within the industry. It says that the decision to do that is consistent with industry standard practices. So I'm wondering what this project is really doing that is atypical of other cannabis facilities to save energy. Save, not buy it from a different place, but how is it conserving energy?
Nicole, do you want to? I mean, my understanding, there she is.
Go ahead, Glenn. I'll follow up.
My understanding is that, and I'm not an industry expert, but there are light types that are used within grow facilities, and then there are more efficient lighting that the applicant is proposing to utilize.
Who is Synergy?
That is the applicant's outside consultant that was hired.
Is that a representative of the applicant, or is that a representative, a consultant for the city, or there are letters in here? I'm just not sure what to do with it or where it's from.
Synergy was hired by the applicant. They provide the technical studies, and then our environmental consultant peer reviews them.
Okay, so then I guess I need the applicant to explain to me why they say it's consistent with standard industry practice. How that is energy saving, if it's standard practice.
Nicole, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, and I would also ask that the applicant's representative discuss it at greater length. But the issue from a CEQA perspective is that they are exceeding the soon to be adopted energy codes, the 2023 energy code, which is considerably more energy efficient in its requirements than the construction even of the existing portion of the building, which was built under less stringent building codes and energy codes. All of those codes are adopted together, as you know. And this building was constructed 2 codes ago. And so the analysis that was conducted by the consultant pertains to energy code efficiencies as opposed to existing conditions. I'm sorry, Ms. Alain, you're muted.
Not anymore. Okay, but essentially, they're not permitted yet. By the time they submit for plan check, I mean, they'll have to comply with 2023. So they are meeting 2023 codes, or they are exceeding it?
According to the information we were provided, they are exceeding it.
In energy use.
Correct. Or energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Nicole? For environmental consultant, thank you. At this point, and there are no other questions for staff, at this point, the public hearing is open. The applicant has 10 minutes. Is the applicant here?
Yes, good evening. This is Edith Spitz, and I'm honored to be here by this meeting. We are working very hard to try to get CUP for this building. We really would love to go ahead and do everything as code has to do. I saw you were concerned with, I heard you were concerned about the lighting. If need be, we would definitely consider the LED lighting as well, and we will do everything to conserve energy and to do everything accordingly to what is the right way to do things. We are living in Palm Springs. We have a home here, and we're living here since we have our home here since '94, and we really love to be here, and we would love to go ahead with this project. And I hope that you will give us the permission to go ahead to cultivate and go ahead with our project.
Can you explain your I would normally expect the applicant to explain the project to us.
Okay, I have Hershey here, my husband. Could he fill in as well? Yes.
Yes, if he introduces himself.
Sure.
Yes, my name is Hershey Spitz, and I'm very blessed to be Edith's husband for the past 46 years. We've been together. The purpose we're looking, we own the building. The building has been ours for many years, about 10 years. We have a tenant that has the dispensary. We've been trying to utilize the building the best we can to make sure that it gets whatever we can, it should work properly. We're looking to do the cultivation, to have the opportunity to be able to maximize whatever we can with the building, being that it's a good building. And of course, we have our engineers working with this. Amy has been involved with the city on our behalf for this close to 2 years, making sure that everything, whatever's necessary, should be done. We're looking for cultivation, transportation, and license to be able to cultivate, and also have the delivery option to deliver the cannabis to whoever needs to have it done. That's what we're working with. Just as a little background, I'm not going to take the time, but I know we have a very, very precious group listening to us. We got involved in this in a certain way. We have a grandchild, unfortunately, back east, that has suffering from seizures for years. He's a seven-year-old child. And we've been told by numerous doctors that cannabis is something that helps for seizures tremendously. We haven't tried it yet, but knowing that this is something that's being produced and it's natural and there's no side effects that as medication, we feel this is something that definitely helps the environment and helps the world, and it's something that is natural and could help heal people, do the right thing for people. People need it for cancers, for different sicknesses. Therefore, we feel it's the right thing to do. We are involved right now for the past 10 years back east. We have a plant in Jackson, New Jersey, in the agriculture business, an indoor plant for vegetables and microgreens, which we've been involved for 10 years. So we're very, very familiar with indoor growing. That project has been there for, like I mentioned, about 10 years. State of the art, works fully on LEDs, fully operational, and really something that whoever is familiar with Verdini back east knows that it's something that carries a lot of weight that people enjoy. And we're looking to do the same thing, to be a pride for the community and for the city, to say this is one cultivation facility that really keeps up the standard or beyond standard, does everything the way it should be done, and nothing should be, without cutting any corners and doing anything. We appreciate to be able to have an opportunity to get the approval from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
Madam Chair, I see no one with their hand raised and no one has signed up in advance for this item.
Thank you. At this point, you would have 3 minutes for rebuttal, but what I'd rather do is leave this open in case members of the commission have questions for you. Are there any questions of the applicant before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed and the matter is before the commission. just moving this along, I'm going to make a motion to approve and open that for discussion. Is there any discussion?
I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion, a second, no discussion. Can you call the roll, please?
Chair Womack,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Leyen,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Motion carries 6 in favor with 1 absent.
Thank you. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. And we, like my husband said, we'll be proud that we're going to take care of everything the way it should be done, the right way, and everybody will be successful. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 2B, 12 at Las Palmas LLC, for a conditional use permit, major development permit, and tentative track map to construct a 12-unit multifamily residential development consisting of 4 sale condominiums on a 0.95 acre site located at 1424 Camino Norte, Zone C1 and R2. A staff report, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Planning Commissioners. If you just give me a moment while I pull up my screen. Okay. So the matter before you is a continued public hearing for the 12-unit project called 12 at Las Palmas LLC. It was first scheduled for hearing back in September. The matter was continued to October to allow on-site posting of the project. At the October hearing on October 12th, the Planning Commission continued the matter to tonight's meeting, directing the applicant to address some items, one relative to the landscape plan, including more trees and further developing that plan. Other issues were relative to the elevations, particularly along Palm Canyon and the single-story living spaces that front that area of the project, as well as the design of the unit that faces Camino Norte. And then there was some direction on handling waste disposal and the applicant to remove the gate. So let me go through some of the items that have changed based on your direction. As you'll recall, just to orient everyone from this to where the site is located, it is west of Palm Canyon and Camino Monte Vista, that intersection. It's east of Camino Norte, north of Vereda Norte, and south of Stevens, in the middle of the block. So the view that you saw back in October is shown here at the top. There was some comments about the design of the single-story spaces fronting the street and how those were, the materials that were being used. So there was direction to look at alternate materials and look at how we might activate the space. So what they proposed is shown here on the bottom of the screen. And the perspective you see here does show more of the trees that are being proposed along the frontage. It's kind of in the foreground here, but they're very light in what you see. But it also highlights the lower elevation design enhancements that are proposed. So this is just another view along Palm Canyon of the before at the top and the revised at the bottom. In terms of the elevation, the two-dimensional view of that street frontage, this is kind of the design inspiration seen here at the bottom left. It was from Park Imperial South, which is nearby. So you see there's the existing decorative block on that project. The applicant has indicated that the CMU block shown in the material selection here is kind of just for reference, but they do intend to incorporate a decorative block on the lower portion of this elevation. This was not part of your package, but at the request of a commissioner, we asked the applicant to provide more context of the project as it relates to the adjacent properties. So what you see here is the view from Palm Canyon. To the left of on the left side of the screen is the existing office building, which is south of the project site. And on the north is the proposed affordable housing project on the right side of the screen.
And what are the distances on those from the street?
I believe this has a similar setback to the project site, so roughly 5 feet from the property line. That being said, the project on the south does have raised planters that have more depth, similar to what they're proposing here. On the north side, on the affordable housing project, there is more depth between the property line and the unit itself. They do have deeper overhangs on this project. In terms of the Camino Norte frontage, the previous view that you saw in October is shown at the top. And then you see the low sloped roof design that was called into question by some commissioners and why it was varying so much from the rest of the project. So in response, the applicant has changed the design of that roof and made it a flat roof. You see some other minor elevation changes shown here, removing that fireplace element and creating some space, an outdoor space here. And so this is the elevation along that street frontage. The previous view that you saw in October here at the top, and the revised elevation shown here at the bottom. At the last review of this, the commission had some comments about further developing this landscape plan and providing additional trees for the project. So that was the previous elevation or previous landscape plan. This is the revised landscape plan showing the incorporation of additional trees along Palm Canyon, but also showing locations of the palms in the sidewalk, as well as some additional trees that are in various interior locations. They've also added some planting and some planting materials here along Camino Norte and further developed the interior buffer spaces. So the trees that are shown here are Palo Verde trees in the plan. The applicant has discussed potentially changing those to be fruitless olive trees instead. Some other items that were discussed were relative to the gated entry and waste disposal. The applicant continues to request that the commission consider approving gates for this project. They have presented an argument in a letter to the commission, which was an attachment to your report. So I believe they'll be speaking to that issue more during the public hearing. Waste disposal, they have shown where the trash receptacles are proposed in the garages of the project, so that remains. Staff might recommend that the commission include a condition of approval for the project if there is still concern about this and how this is being managed for the project. That requires the CC&Rs to specify that the condominium owners shall accept and properly dispose of any waste, household waste, from an occupant or tenant of the accessory living space. And also that if the condominium owner is leasing the primary unit of those units that front Palm Canyon, that lessee would be responsible for accepting the household waste and disposing of it properly. And so that would be something that we could impose as part of the CC&Rs if the commission would like to do that. Lastly, if you've seen in your packet and a few that have come in recently, public comments about the project's traffic impacts. including the street curve on Camino Norte. There was a letter that we received by an attorney from Chadden Brown, Karstens, and Mintier, who is representing several residents in the area, stating that the city cannot rely on the CEQA exemption due to traffic impacts associated with the project. So staff would like to address the points raised and respond to why the city actually can rely on the proposed CEQA exemption. The letter does state that the project's entrance relative to Camino Norte roadway is a traffic hazard, explaining that residents have observed narrowly missing collisions between vehicles and pedestrians near this curve, and that an unusual circumstance exists due to this curve. But based on the city engineer's review, the project does not present an unusual circumstance because there are other residential developments similar to the project on the same street that take vehicular access from Camino Norte. So consequently, the project would be similar and not unusual with existing developments along Camino Norte. That being said, staff did ask the police department to provide records of accidents at this curve during the past 5 years, and there were none reported to the police department. So even if there are unusual circumstances here, there will be no significant impact caused by the project because there have been no traffic accidents reported on the subject roadway curve. Adding the project, which will increase in 80 number of vehicles tripped per day, will not increase the number of accidents. In fact, the project will require widening of the roadway to be consistent with city standards and installation of a sidewalk to improve circulation along the street. Finally, the letter indicates that the city recognized a safety hazard with this roadway curve when it conditioned the recently approved affordable housing development to the north of the subject site to only have emergency access to Camino Norte. But in fact, that's not correct. The restricted access was imposed based on resident requests, but not due to any traffic concerns or traffic hazards at this location. So it was really imposed per resident request, but not as a requirement or a concern of our city engineer. So consequently, the city engineer believes there will be no traffic impacts. Staff continues to recommend that this project does qualify as a Class 32 exemption under CEQA. So that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to answer questions of the commission.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Hirschbein.
Is this going to go back to ARC?
Yes.
Okay. And could you go back to the plan that shows the landscape plan for a minute?
Yes.
Okay. And kind of below, I'm looking at the landscape area on Palm Canyon in front of a typical unit. Can you blow that up so it's a little bigger? Okay, thanks. So I know originally where there was some discussion about the front to back dimension, or in this case, between Palm Canyon and the unit, the dimension of the planter bed itself, including both steps. And I was wondering what that is now.
I believe that's 10 feet from
10 feet
front to back.
And is that enough for a tree?
Yeah, the city's standards for parking lots for shade trees is 6 feet in those planter areas, so 10 feet would be adequate.
Well, yeah, but in a parking lot, you don't have a building right next to the tree. I'm just wondering if 10 feet, because it's really going to be less than 5 feet from the trunk, right? If it's in the center there. it's probably going to be like 4 feet, 4.5 feet from the trunk. Is that enough for a tree, especially a Palo Verde, even a olive tree after it gets bigger?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can look at what species would be appropriate if the Palo Verde is, determined it's going to grow too large for the kind of vertical space it has. It's certainly something we can review with the ARC if the commission would like to do so.
Is there any play where they could put the tree in the public right of way in the walkway area?
I believe, well, then I think the other side of that is you might have vehicles clipping the shade canopy on it. So there's kind of the other side of that, but I defer to the city engineer if there's any other comments on that.
Commissioner Hirschbein, I believe that we had sort of examined this in response to the last discussion, and it was determined that we could not put the tree in the right of way. So it would have to, part of this is already in the right of way, 5 feet of this planter, as I understand it. So the tree would need to be located within those planter boxes.
So could you move the trunk closer to the walkway to get it some breathing room next to the building?
I think that we could certainly look at that in addition to what species would be most successful in this type of planting box. If that's your direction, we could work on that certainly with the applicant and with the city engineer and others to make sure that we're complying with all of the regulations here.
Okay, thank you.
You have other questions? Are there other questions, Commissioner Roberts or Vice Chair Roberts?
Yes, thank you. I think that Commissioner Hirschbein's concern about tree location is a good one. Is there any reason we can't just suggest to the applicant that they plant the tree closer to the sidewalk than the building? That way it would have some room and not have its branches grow so quickly into the building area. And I would also suggest that specific species are considered that are slow growing and that don't have an enormous canopy. And that should mitigate the issue. Can we go back to that last slide, but full size? So the plan slide, it can be the landscape slide. That's fine. Thank you. So given the applicant's arguments about gates, does staff have any real response to that? Is there a reason to give this particular project gates versus other projects where our general plan states that we shouldn't be making these communities gated communities? That's my first question. My second question is also, given the concerns of the neighbors, does staff see any real concern with this driveway access? I know staff recommends moving forward as is, but I wondered if the arguments from the neighbors swayed staff in any way. From my own perspective, it doesn't look like a safety hazard. It's not that deeply into a curve, and it's going to be very, very little traffic, and it's not a heavily trafficked street to begin with. But I'd like staff's take if you have one on this.
So to respond to the question about the gates in terms of staff's analysis, I think we identified, and the applicant correctly showed the zoning code section that identifies those issues relative to the criteria when evaluating whether a project can have gates. It's in section 93.05 of our zoning code. Paragraph 2A says that gates can be approved by the Planning Commission where the applicant shows that significant impact by unauthorized parking from adjacent uses or significant impact from traffic from adjacent uses beyond the design capacity of the internal streets. So when we looked at those criteria, we didn't see, at least initially, that the argument that adjacent uses would be impacting the parking situation for this project. The applicant has presented an argument in their letter, as I've noted, but we don't see an adjacent use creating that has, you know, insufficient parking or creates a concern in terms of creating impacts to this project. The applicant, as I said, made their case. So because of that, we have left the conditions in the draft resolution that you have before you. The other side to that, though, also is gates would reduce the speed at which vehicles enter and exit the site. So if there's any concern about vehicles going too fast out of this project, the gates would obviously minimize that and require that they enter and exit and, you know, address, or not address, but slow down to not hit the gate, or, you know, to enter the site and exit the site.
Okay, wouldn't a stop sign at the entry of the development to the development force a car to stop to begin with? And I have another question. With respect to guest parking, is there any on this site that is not in front of somebody's driveway?
Yeah, a stop sign would, you know, it's not a physical barrier, but it obviously is something that people should adhere to as they enter, or I should say, exit a site. There is parking along on the south side here and here.
Are those guest spots?
Yes.
Okay, so it provides the two required guest spots. Okay, so, you know, obviously every developer that comes before us with a development wants gates, because gates potentially can add value, because there is a perceived sense of security that comes with gates. But other than that, staff isn't recommending gates for any reason here, based on your recommendation. Okay. And with respect to exiting, anything to add on that, given the arguments of the neighborhood?
No, nothing further really to add, other than, you know, our city engineer has evaluated the ingress and egress for the site and doesn't find any concern for a traffic hazard for the project.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Roberts, if I might just add one item. I think that there was discussion about, or certainly the community has alluded to providing access off of Palm Canyon as an alternative. And I would just say that from the city's perspective, that would create a different and in our opinion, worse traffic condition, because we certainly are not encouraging traffic entering and exiting off of Palm Canyon. So our evaluation is there's no issue with this location. It is our preferable location, and it's not creating any issues.
Yeah, thank you. I saw that as well, that suggestion. Okay, thank you very much. Those conclude my questions of staff.
Other questions of staff? Commissioner Irvin?
Yeah, I just have a quick follow-up also about that speed. The speed going out of the building. Have we had any type of incident with a project similar to this, where leaving the project, we've had accidents where we were able to report any accidents that happened leaving outside of a community similar to this?
None that come to mind, Commissioner Irvin. You know, anytime you have a project that has an exit onto a street, there's always a potential, but nothing that would cause us to have any concern with what's being proposed here.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Irvin, I might add that, you know, there are other methods available through the city to evaluate if other traffic calming measures are needed. So, you know, if there is a concern about traffic calming here, or if we find out that we need to look at ways to mitigate speed or manage that, there are processes available through the city and through the city engineer that we can evaluate that and, you know, determine if any mitigation measures or traffic calming measures are needed, I should say. So that is available in the future.
Thank you.
other questions? I have some if the commission doesn't have more questions. Mr. Knoll, can you go back and show us where the street widening would happen and where the sidewalk would go in?
Yes, Chair. Just give me a moment. Currently the pavement, I'm not sure exactly how wide the existing pavement is along Camino Norte. But basically they would have to widen the street to meet the current standard for the street to be consistent with the general plan. So they would widen it, install the curb and gutter, as well as add the sidewalk along the frontage. So that
Are we the only sidewalk on that frontage right now? Or is the sidewalk, does the sidewalk have to be added for the Aloe project as well?
yes. So there would be a sidewalk added along this side as well.
So along the curve, the two new projects will be both widening the street and adding sidewalk.
That's correct.
I have a couple more questions. One thing that was raised, and then I don't think got into your notes, was the applicant was going to create a hammerhead for turnarounds. Has that happened?
So in the event emergency personnel or a fire apparatus does need to access the property, they would enter here, they would have ability to turn into here, back up here and exit. So essentially there is an existing hammerhead within the current driveway configuration.
That meets the emergency requirements.
Correct.
Okay, just a few more questions. One that's not from our last request, but are there kitchen facilities in the ADUs?
Yeah, they do have a fridge and I believe a cooking top, but I would ask the applicant to confirm that when they speak.
Okay. And then I have a couple of questions on the landscape plan, maybe comments. The African sumac that's on the interior of the project. I know at Asino we've lost all of ours over the years. They're apparently dying across the valley. The Palo Verde that they put in is blue, and that's a much smaller and much more contained Palo Verde. I think that would actually work in the front. The fruitless olives are small. Those obviously work if they're a large enough box when they go in initially. The worry for Commissioner Hirschbein is that some portion of the planter bed is taken up by the footing of the unit or the wall that's there. So it's really a question of how much space is left next to the footing. So I think there's probably enough room for a small tree. It just needs to be more toward the center or the front. I would eventually, when we get to it, I'll raise concerns about especially the African sumac, and I think it might be nice to have more trees, small trees in the front. The last question is, you indicated they gave us a prettier picture of the frontage and more defined block, but there's actually not a defined block that we're seeing. Is that correct? So they've given us a picture, but we don't know what we're actually getting.
So the material that's referenced on the plan is actually this CMU block, which is a standard block detail that's painted white. My understanding from conversations I've had with the applicant is that the block will be a decorative blocks, which would be more of a decorative material than what you see here. And at this point, I don't have more details on that. So the applicant may be able to expound on that.
Right, I would expect that would have come to us with details when this did come in. It's an incomplete in that fashion, just to express my concern about not getting that kind of detail when it is the frontage of the building. I think that one more question on the traffic calming. If traffic calming is necessary, that's something that the applicant could volunteer to do, but we can't, it's not within our purview to require it. Is that correct?
Not under our CEQA determination, no. But we could ask the applicant if they'd be willing to do that. It's not uncommon for neighborhoods or developments adjacent to a street that may be a busy street or just may have traffic that goes at higher speeds than normal to go through a city process separately from a project to get speed bumps put in or signage to create some traffic calming on a specific street or area.
Okay. And then again, with the attorney's letter on CEQA that we got, this our city attorney's view is that they would not prevail if there was litigation on this. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Yes, the letter essentially says that they have substantial evidence that there would be additional impacts to traffic based upon personal observations of the neighbors. And that certainly is information that the commission can consider. However, there's also countervailing substantial evidence that's been provided by staff through the city's engineering department that this curve, that this area does not pose any special or unusual traffic circumstances, that there are no traffic safety issues that need to be mitigated here for this project, and therefore the Class 32 exemption is a good one. And that provides substantial evidence to justify the exemption here, notwithstanding that the neighbors may disagree in the city's judgment on that.
Thank you. That concludes my questions. Are there other questions for staff? Seeing none, this will go, I will open the public hearing and the applicant has 10 minutes.
Hi, this is Ernest Vincent. I think Dennis Cunningham is on, but he needs to be unmuted for him to speak. Dennis,
I'm there. I'm here.
Go ahead.
Ernie, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so let me grab the mic for a second, okay, Commission? Okay, we've been I've been working with the commission for about 28 years, which doesn't mean anything more than just a historical reference to being, in the city. So what came up tonight initially was, am I on? Is that, hello?
We can hear you, Dennis.
Okay, good. So, I look at the first things that came on were about the trees. The thing that we need to look at, and again, I've been around the community for a long time. We have less than 200 feet of frontage on Palm Canyon. Not that I would disrespect Palm Canyon in any way. Remember, a city lot is 100 feet wide. And so we have less than that. So what we're trying to do is accommodate a visual as you come down Palm Canyon, not steal the visual and say, okay, look at me versus look at them, or look at Arrive, which is an absolute gorgeous project. Just kind of roll and blend and work. And so we spent a lot of time and effort on it. And so I think that the discussion tonight has been primarily about the trees. Okay, so the trees, when we talk about Palo Verde, I look back on, actually we spent some time and I look back on some of the units that developments we built over the years, which would be 48 at Baristo, which they've totally redone their landscaping because we were probably a little overzealous at the time. And it's been so many years. And that's the great thing about being involved in a community for basically most of my life. And then we looked at 43 Racket Club, and I started looking at those mesquite trees and the Palo Verde, and they do just get big. And so I was talking to David in planning, I said, let's change it. Let's change that front. They're not planter boxes so much, but they're a planter area. between the retaining wall that's part of the city and then up to the front of the building. Let's change that to 36-inch box olives. So we're not talking about putting a sprig of olive in, but we're also not talking about putting, some giant tree in. Because remember, we have less than 200 foot of frontage. When you go beyond our frontage into the other buildings and stuff, their landscaping is becoming a bit, overgrown, like our projects have in the past. And what happens is we become, I don't know, just zealous when we get it being, no, we don't want little sprig trees, we want the real deal. But then, I don't know, I've been in town 30 plus years and have been able to reflect and look at it. So I'd like to be able to tell the commission tonight to let's go to 36-inch olives and center them in that planter area in front of the guest houses. And I think another area that you all brought up was the gates. And you have the discussions and the call-ins and the reports and so on about the gates. The one thing about the gates is that, and I can't remember who brought it up, but they are a bit, in a sense, traffic calming, because you do have to stop at the gate. You can't just bomb out if you're on your earphones, whatever you're doing. You have to stop and decompress and move out, which is similar to let's say pull onto the freeway at rush hour, and there's a green light. They move you out in that way. And so I think in a reach out to the neighborhood, as well as our security and so on about it, is gates. I think are a good idea for this project. Projects we've done in the past is somewhere, and there's been years when the planning commission has come up and said, okay, well, we don't want to gate off a community because there's, we have a flow through. But this one, actually, I think what happened in the beginning of the discussion was it's about 120 feet to go into the project. So let's just live it. So what does happen? You go around the neighborhood. I mean, come on, there's no place to go. There's no connection there, and there's no flow through. And so that's just what I want to say to the planning commission. And I think, we've spent, like I said, 30 years building here for over 500 units. And I think we've done a good job, and we want to continue to do a good job. And we also want to work with the community. And I think putting the gates up is a good idea. And I guess that's all I got for you. Thank you.
How much time do I have?
There, you're muted.
How much time do I have left? Hello, commissioners.
I think that will be up to the planning director.
I believe you have about 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Roll, Ernie, roll.
Yeah, this is Ernie Vincent.
We've lost you. You're muted, Mr. Vincent. You're muted.
How about now?
Perfect.
Thank you, Madam
You
Chair.
have 2 minutes, Ernie. Hustle.
Yes, well, I just wanted to address a little bit further the gates, and Commissioner Roberts is absolutely right. As a developer, that's something that we want. It does help us. We understand that the city has the ordinance because they're concerned about a kind of, walling off of the community and so forth. But our development does have 3 units entirely inside. There are 9 units facing the outside. And there is access through gates that we've done on other, similar to what we've done on other projects, such as Twin Palms, 43 Racket Club, where you can see that there's access to the street from the gate, and also those gates are set up so that people on the outside can sort of knock on the door from the gate. That's one consideration. Another one is the homeless, the transient issue in the area, which we think gates would help. Those two conditions alone, I think your city attorney will tell you are not enough for the planning commission to allow gates, which is why we're arguing that the planning commission could reasonably find that there is significant negative impact from people coming down the street, occupying the guest parking that we do have, creating additional traffic on the hammerheads and so forth. And also, obviously, gating would not have a negative effect on the traffic and parking on the outside of the community. So if they can make those findings, they would be able to allow gates. But you would have to consider, the other arguments that we've made. If you think that those are legitimate, we would really like to have the gates. I guess I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there members of the public who wish to speak?
Yes, I would. I'm Garth Gilpin, and we sent a letter into the Planning Commission yesterday signed by 18 neighbors. And did you receive that letter?
Yes, we did.
Can you please show it up on the screen?
We don't. I'm sorry. You have a chance to speak. You're not asking things of the commission.
Okay. Anyway, there's 18 neighbors signed that. There are 12 houses within the 500-mile radius or 500-foot radius of those people, those 18 people. All those 18 people want is a traffic study. That's all we want. We want the project. We just want a traffic study. So anyway, the circle, I sent in a letter giving the 18 names and the drawing of the 500-foot circle where the houses existed. Also, when Mr. Newell talked about the letter from the attorney, he said there were several neighbors. There were 18 neighbors who signed that letter along with the attorney. So I just want the council to know that there's more than several people concerned. The trash thing from the 8 sites is still not acceptable. Absent owners aren't going to allow people to enter their garages for trash. And then these people then on trash day, they're not going to come around and open the garages and take the trash cans out. So you got to have the 8 STR units have to have trash, individual responsibility for their trash. If you have a woman with a baby in there, someone cooking constantly, you're going to have trash and they have no place to put it. On page 27 of your comprehensive fee study, I talked to Mr. Newell on 12/6, and it's a traffic survey fee, $571.82. And I said, Mr. Newell, what is that for? He says he didn't know. So you guys got to get your act together. I'm sorry, but anyway, the neighborhood would like a traffic study, period. Thank you.
Are there other members of the public who wish to speak? Planning Director, do you have?
No one else has signed up in advance, Madam Chair, and there are no hands raised at the moment.
The applicant has 3 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay, so I have, am I on?
Yes, you are, Mr. Cunningham.
Okay, I don't have any rebuttal. Actually, what I want to say is that, like I said, I've spent 30 years in our community and built a lot of projects. And this is one of the projects that we're building. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of thought and working with the 71 units next door and with what's happening out on Palm Canyon and making it something that'll work for everybody. Again, it's only less than 200 feet, which is a little less. which is like 2 single-family lots. It's not like you're going to go by there and just, oh my God, it just is the best thing I've ever seen. You know, like the Arrive Hotel or something. This is kind of a quiet as you roll through kind of thing. But I do have the feeling toward the folks where and we use words like additional ADU. Well, these are ADUs, but they're not ADUs. They can be, they're not be. If you want to run under ADU, nobody's got the restriction on what you do and what you don't do. The state has it. And it isn't that. It's just blending with the community. And as far as the trash was concerned, hey, think about it for a second. If you've got a relative living in your guest house in front, or a friend, or a guest, or maybe you're renting it or using it for an office or a pool cabana. I mean, come on, there's so many uses there. And then you work it out with the people who live, who have it. You deal with your trash accordingly. You did ask us to, am I still there?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. So what happened was you asked us last time, well, what are we going to do? We got a hold of the trash people in town. And they said, okay, well, we're going to do 2 cans in the garage, and we don't have a collective area. But it's in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal. We work it out. And those aren't necessarily ADUs. But remember, too, there's also off-street parking out there on Palm Canyon. And there's nobody lining up for that parking in front of our place or Ingrid's place next door. And also I looked at all the growth that goes on with all the trees and stuff that start at Vistachino and go on down to Ingrid's. I'm not bagging on anybody. But I tell you, it's just like some of the stuff I've done in the past. We put in the big mesquites and the big palo verdes, and we're beating them back. So that's why we moved to the olive trees in the front, and then we are really tying into the project down that Barry Burkus did it down there, Imperial Park South. I think that's a good little blend, moving it through. And I want to close it by saying I'm not disrespecting our neighbors at all. I want those gates, I think, are important for all the reasons you saw come, through all the discourse from all the different people. And also, I think that all the people that wrote in about that curve and this and that, the gates are definitely going to help. And I'm not saying stand all, but I do, as I have in all the 400 and some units that I have built in our community over the last 25, 28 years, I've always been sensitive to the folks, and I'll continue to be. And that's it. Wish me luck.
Thank you. Before I close the public hearing, are there questions for the applicant? Commissioners, I have 2 for you, Mr. Cunningham. One is regarding the block that's going to be used. It wasn't submitted to us. You haven't chosen it yet. Is that what I should read?
Are you referencing the guest house veneer?
Yes. Okay.
Well, that if here I wanted to say add something here is that when we're in the past always been in the gallery where we could walk up and point and work it out. We don't have that right now. We'll have it in January, but from what I understand. But what happens is we have to pinpoint out what and who and what and what's going on. Okay, so what that veneer is, we are basically, more specifically, pulling off of the design from Imperial Park South. So that veneer is 1.5 veneer block. It's the concrete block with I have the turnouts every 18 inches for the like you see if you relate it to or can relate it to or specifically make us related to the veneer frontage of Imperial Park South, and that will be the concrete block veneer, which is 1.5 thick, and it's a concrete block. And then you turn the blocks every 16 inches to point out, on a matrix, and that'll all be painted white to match up with what we're doing there.
The second question is regarding the traffic calming Would you be willing to pay for and work with the neighborhood on traffic calming issues?
Well, that's something that, I would defer to the planning department and planning department and engineering. But I'm going to make a blanket statement and say we would be behind everything, but I don't want to be legally hooked up to anything.
That's a no. Thank you.
That's not a no. That's not a no. That's not a no. That's not a no. Continue.
Public hearing is closed if there are no more questions of the applicant. Thank you. This matter is before the commission. We have several items to discuss. And what I wanted to get were general comments. We've got landscape, we have gates, we have the frontage, and then we have the overall project. Commissioner Hirschbein, do you want to make general comments?
No, specific comments.
Okay.
Regarding the veneer on those units facing Palm Canyon, yeah, we didn't get the information. There's a rendering and a verbal. I would like to refer that in the spirit of how we've restructured the review process. I'd like to refer that specifically to the ARC with the note that we expect the detail to comply with that Park Imperial South look. I don't think we have to get involved with it much more than that. As far as the landscape, I want to make a similar comment because we have a landscape architect on ARC. Our concern is Vice Chair Roberts expressed it, and I would think that maybe some other commissioners would agree that putting any sort of tree 4 feet away from the building is probably not a good idea. Let ARC figure out the species and the placement based on our concerns, because I don't know tree species that well. I do know that planting a tree 4 feet from a building doesn't seem like a very good idea. But I defer also to ARC because they have the expertise. Thank you.
Vice Chair Roberts.
Thank you. I concur with much of what Commissioner Hirschbein said. I think literally and figuratively, we're getting into the weeds here. Let's leave those details to ARC and let them work with the applicant and our staff on trees and landscaping. I think it is very important because this does face Palm Canyon. With respect to the block on the face of the guest houses, or whatever we want to call them, that face Palm Canyon, the block they're showing as an example of the block versus the rendering is the same block. The pattern that they're showing is simply cutting the block in half and turning the face out. So technically they're showing the correct material. What we're looking for is a detail of how they plan to use it. And that would be helpful because the difference between how that block is cut and turned is huge. In the small image or example of the block, it looks like the side of a prison. In their renderings, it looks very pleasant and interesting, and certainly a nod to mid-century style. With respect to the gates, I haven't heard a good argument yet for the gates. I don't think they're really going to have a problem with people coming in and parking in their guest spots. It's just not an area where there is a big problem with parking and tons of traffic. They want the gates, again, because the gates can add value. But if we're going to trust our general plan and our zoning, which discourages gates, I think staff's call is the best on that. I can't really speak to the trash can issue. I do believe staff got it right with respect to not adding changing anything with respect to traffic danger or people accidents happening from people pulling in and out of the driveway. If we really believe we need to do traffic calming for 12 units, maybe just a stop sign facing the inside of the property so that as people come to the street, they won't come flying out into the, as they're leaving that development coming to the street, they won't fly out. Generally, people don't drive that way anyway. I live in a development, people don't come flying out into the middle of the street, they stop. They don't want to get hit any more than they want to hit anybody. But I think a simple traffic sign, which is much less money than gates, simply tells people to stop if we think that's necessary. So I guess what I would say is I would move approval as presented by staff. And
we're not quite there yet. We want to let other people make suggestions. I'll take a motion from you after everybody else has spoken.
Well, I would argue that a motion can always be stated. It doesn't have to be voted on.
I think I'd still like to have people make comments before I take the motion. I'll come back to you as soon as we've done it. Are there other comments from the commission? I have them. I think we need to incorporate the CCNR condition that Mr. Newell raised, regarding the trash, that it's an obligation. I think that's really important that we include that. I disagree with Mr. Hirschbein a little bit about the landscape. I don't think we're in the weeds. I think we should at least send along to the ARC that the African sumacs don't do well. They haven't been doing well for 10 years in the valley. They've been dying out. And those are the interior trees. So have them work through a tree that does work. I actually think the tree, the 36 box frontage tree, the fruitless olive will work perfectly well. And I have a lot of experience with trees, having worked on planting about 250 of them in the last couple of years. But I think we can send those comments along. I think having the ARC work out the issues, and I agree with the no on the gate. Are there any more comments, Commissioner Lane?
Yes, I just have a couple. I agree with the assessment that gated communities are specifically not wanted, especially in our downtown area, and is spelled out in the general plan, and there's good reasons for that. I don't believe that the applicant has raised concerns that meet the threshold necessary to ignore that. In particular, a couple of things that they've cited that we haven't discussed. One is regarding transients in the area and the likelihood of increased transient problems. I think that the best solution to moving the transients along is to build the project. Right now, there's a vacant lot, there's trees, people can and do camp out there. I hear them when I go by, they do live there. And as soon as this project is built, they're not going to have a place left. So I think that is, this project is going to take care of that itself. I also think that if the applicant raises the issue that it'll be severe impact on his guest parking, if people can come in there without gates, then it's incumbent upon the applicant to design a project with more guest parking internal. Reduce the size of the units, reconfigure things, work that out, because I don't think at any point the applicant has been led to believe that they're going to be able to have a gated community here. And that, so I think that there are ways that the applicant can address that themselves. The only other thing that I want to say is regarding the desire from the residents to have a traffic study. I hear you, I understand your concern. Nonetheless, I think I give greater gravitas to the engineering staff and the professionals in the area it's not fair to say that you want to have a traffic study done and that's it, because what's that going to do? You're going to, I suspect, then want something as a result of the traffic study. And it's not fair to say that it hasn't been studied. It has been studied. It's been studied by staff who have professional credentials equal to that would be in those of a consultant who would come in and study it. They gave, even in this meeting, some of the results of the studies. They looked at the history of accidents. There was zero history of accidents in the last 5 years. They've looked at analogous streets in the neighborhoods to see what problems may arise there, and they produced the results, which again, do not indicate that there is going to be a level of traffic that will meet the threshold that would constitute the need for a study. They've also taken a look at the sightlines, anything that a traffic study would do. The staff, who is fully qualified of engineers at the City of Palm Springs, has already taken a look at. If you want a traffic study, that is something that you do when you build hundreds of units, when you build new streets that have traffic signals and interconnect with other signals. It's for projects that have much greater road network addition than this does. So I agree that it, I hear what you're saying, but I think that as lay people, even you recognize that what you're putting forward is just anecdotal information of there was a near miss. That does not rise to the level of needing to have a traffic study. So those are my thoughts. I also think that I agree with Commissioner Hirschbein that we should turn the blocks and the trees over to the Architectural Review Committee.
Other comments? Commissioner Roberts, your motion?
I move approval as presented with the additional condition of a stop sign facing into the complex at the entrance of the driveway. Its purpose being to have those leaving the development stop before they enter traffic.
Would you accept as friendly the condition staff suggested that the requirement to take out the part in the CCNRs, that's the requirement to take out the trash, belongs to the owner of the unit that has the auxiliary unit with the language the staff suggested?
Yes, yes.
Okay, is there
I would second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. Commissioner Hirschbein.
Yeah, I would agree to the motion, but I'd like to add the direction to ARC about the landscape and the block detail.
So what I'm hearing is that we'd like ARC to pay particular attention to the detail of the block facade facing Palm Canyon.
And that it has some relation to the example proffered by the applicant, the Park Imperial detail.
Well, I feel a little odd chaining them to that. What I'd rather do is have them create a clear detail of what they've rendered, because that will probably work fine.
I think that
then we're just approving that rendering. Is that what?
Well, that's what we're approving is their design. We just need to get clarity on their design.
Commissioner Roberts, is it friendly to you and the seconder of the motion to ask that the applicant provide clear detail, indicate that we haven't seen it, and ask the ARC to review it?
Yes.
And is that a yes, Commissioner Olayan?
Yes.
Okay, and we're referring to them the trees.
The entire landscape, yes.
Yes, the entire landscape plan.
Well, again, I'd like to just make sure that the concern about the distance to the building is noted in there.
As staff, you have that, you'll carry that through for us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any more comments on the motion?
Madam Chair, if I could just make a clarification on the motion. This would be for no approval of the gate and processing it on the Class 32 exemption, meaning no traffic study, just to clarify.
Correct.
Yes.
Which is asked. Yes.
And for the seconder, that's correct as well, correct? Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Can you call the roll, please?
Chair Robert,
Yes.
Commissioner Land,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yeah.
Commissioner Hirschbein,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Chair Womack.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0 with one absent.
Thank you, and good luck to the applicant. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving.
Madam Chair, I must leave the meeting at this point as I have a potential conflict with the next item.
Thank you. Do you want us to call you when we've concluded?
Yes, if somebody would just text me, I'll come back to the meeting.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, Vice Chair Roberts, he's gone, but I think he's also recused on the following item.
Oh, he is.
That would be true. I am recused on both items.
He's here on multiple forums.
Both of them have a potential conflict with a property that I own close by.
So I think if you wish to be, you can be excused for the rest of the meeting.
I'll take that offer.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good night, all.
Good night. Okay. Item 2C, Rios on behalf of Old Las Palmas Properties LLC for the approval of a change of zone major development permit, tentative tract map, and variance applications for a proposed mixed-use project, which includes 24 residential condominium units and a 2,214 square foot commercial space at 2.4 acre undeveloped parcel located at 575 North Palm Canyon Drive. I think in this instance, we are not going to go into the staff report. We were just going to have comments and then see if there are members of the public that wish to speak. So
correct. If I might just for very briefly, Madam Chair, for the staff report, just for the matter of public record, I think given some of the, the evolution of the discussions and some of the points that were made at the onset of this meeting, staff have not prepared a report or a presentation for tonight, but are requesting that should this item be continued, that the commission also form a subcommittee to work with both staff and the applicant on making revisions to the proposal that we can then bring back to the commission at a future meeting. Thank you.
thank you. What I wanted to do is to clarify some of the concerns that had led us to a suggestion that we postpone this or continue this item. I know I had concerns, Commissioner Hirschbein did, and I believe Commissioner Miller did. I don't know if the other members of the commission did, but if people would like to very briefly clarify their concerns so that the applicant is aware of them, this would be the time to do it. Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, just briefly, I know we're not doing the public hearing essentially, and we'll be back to this. My main concerns are this project is asking for a rezoning, which could make sense if it was appropriately designed. And it's asking for a rezoning out of the central business district zoning to a certain extent. But yet it's providing a project that doesn't really respect its location along Palm Canyon, just north of Vallejo. So my basic concerns are that it has not provided a viable commercial space on the ground floor along Palm Canyon. And also that it's also proposing a driveway along Palm Canyon, which I think is sort of contradicting our goal of providing a seamless pedestrian experience along Palm Canyon, since the project site also has great access from West Chino and Bellardo. Those are my main concerns, that I think it needs some redesign. I support the mixed use concept certainly, but I think there's a lot of details that need to be worked out.
Commissioner Hirschbein, you had comments.
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree 100% with Mr. Miller's comments. And I believe I addressed them in a very broad sense at the beginning. Do you want me to restate them?
If you would just restate them, this is the time to do it.
Thank you. I think Mr. Miller spoke for me as well. We're talking about a viable commercial use there, and something that contributes to the overall street activity. It's a very important site. It's a knuckle between the downtown and the Uptown Design District. It's got continuous usage on either side of it and across the street from it, and it needs to respect that. I know that the architect has had a lot of experience, and I respect the experience in designing spaces that contribute to the public interaction. And I think my opinion is it's fallen short on this one, and he needs to have another look at it. I agree that the driveway going out to Palm Canyon is very problematic, I look forward to working with the applicant to cure some of these problems.
And my concerns are similar. We just sent to City Council, and City Council just passed a zoning change which allowed a reduction in the number of housing units required if there was 75% of the frontage was viable commercial space. I don't believe this project meets those, as currently designed, meets that requirement. And I think it either needs to meet that requirement or it needs to give us the full range of housing that would have been required if it weren't asking for this change. I agree regarding the driveway into the site, and the site is currently designed. What we got was a little bit of back of house on Palm Canyon in a space that wasn't designed such that it could be released if to a retail use if the use that they were proposing didn't work. So I think we need viable retail. If we're going to apply the exemption that we currently passed, I think we need viable retail combined with the housing on that site, or it needs to meet the older requirements. Commissioner Relayan.
Yes, without trying to play devil's advocate, but maybe that's what I'm doing. I wish that we had a presentation and gotten to discuss this a little bit as a group, but I have the same desire to have commercial retail frontage all the way down Palm Canyon, and yay, put some residential above it. Nonetheless, I am not convinced that that is completely necessary at this site, in part because no successful long-term successful commercial retail shopping district is 2 miles long. And if we think it's going to go from Ramon to Vista Chino, which is 2 miles, we are deluding ourselves. Even Chicago's Magnificent Mile is 3/4 of a mile long. They just are not that long. Rodeo Drive, 3rd Street Promenade, those are 3 and 4 blocks long. You don't get solid commercial retail experience for that long a period, for that long a strip, and people won't walk that far. even if you did, people will not walk 2 miles. They're not getting it. So I don't want us to set ourselves up with unrealistic expectations that we're going to develop this to be commercial the whole way. I happen to think that, and I've spent a lot of time this week going back and forth up and down the street and looking at it and riding my bike past it. I'm shortly going to be reported to the police, I think. But this is a good transition between downtown and uptown. You get further uptown, you have a different nature of businesses, different nature of buildings. Then you do downtown, it's a different experience. And I do not think that this is a bad place to have that transition. Would I like to see a little bit more retail, or am I concerned about this particular choice of retail? Yes and yes. Nonetheless, I think there is room for a well-designed building at this location that is not a continuation, does not try to force a continuation of the retail that we see further south, because I don't think that we're going to ever be able to expect that to be built out with successful for a city our size, even when built out, for a successful continuous strip of commercial retail along there. I think that what we'll end up doing is cannibalizing ourselves and creating vacancy in other places if we build, if we overbuild commercial. So that's my 2 cents worth. I know that's kind of different from what other commissioners have indicated they would like to see, and that's a very difficult thing for an applicant to deal with, or a developer, because if they know they have different opinions, but probably they can count noses and see that at this point it doesn't look as though I'm in the majority.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yeah, I agree with some of the stuff you just said, but I disagree with what you said regarding this specific site. As you get down towards Vistachino, you don't need wall-to-wall storefronts. As you get up towards Ramon, maybe you don't need wall-to-wall storefronts. This is a very important site, and it's a link between 2 vibrant commercial districts. And if you put a gap in this particular site, I think you're doing the city and the surrounding merchants a disservice. And that I think you have to look at that specific site. I don't see. And I'm not saying it has to be wall-to-wall storefronts. There might be some break with a little open space or something along those lines, but this site's unique. It's not down towards Vistachino and it's not up towards Ramon. It's at the 50-yard line. That's my opinion. Thanks.
And I just want to respond to that what we can do is either require that they do the full amount of residential that they should do on this site, which is a higher density, or they should have 75% of the retail be viable retail and then be able to do a lower density of residential. And I think for me, it's also meeting the ordinance or the zoning change that we just approved. And I do think that we need to meet that one way or the other. So I don't know if that's enough direction, but it gives some sense. Commissioner Ervin, did you have comments? I didn't mean to leave you out on this.
No, it's fine. I would just be beating a dead horse. You guys have been talking for a while. I kind of agree. I guess I'll say you guys have covered everything that you need to cover. I think we should have some sort of a discussion. Are we having a subcommittee?
Yes, the next thing I was going to do is before we continue it, assign a subcommittee to work on it. To date, Commissioner Hirschbein and Commissioner Miller have agreed to be on a subcommittee. I don't know if anybody else. I will volunteer unless one of Commissioner Olayan or Commissioner Ervin wants to volunteer.
I would volunteer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think she should come in and bring a little bit of seasoning in there because she seems like she has an interesting point. So I think it would be helpful to the discussion to bring a better project back to us.
Thank you. So we have Commissioner Olayan, Commissioner Hirschbein, and Commissioner Miller as the appointed subcommittee. Thank you very much.
And And Madam Chair, before you make that motion or call the roll on that, if we could, since it is a public hearing, open it to members of the public prior to making that final decision.
That is what I was going to do. So what I would like to do is open the public hearing. If there are members of the public who would like to speak on this item, this is the time to do so.
I do see someone identified as Brian's iPhone with their hand up.
Yes, you have the floor if you would identify yourself.
Yes, thank you, Commission. This is Brian Adamson, actually the developer for this project. Simply wanted to say thank you for the input this evening. We do want to apologize for the miscommunication on the retail. We submitted this project almost a year ago originally, and have been waiting through the CEQA process and obviously the general plan amendment, which we understand had enacted the 75% threshold for retail along North Palm Canyon. When the director of planning made us aware of that, clearly we're not meeting that with this current plan. And we fully intend to go back, reconsider that commercial area that goes along Palm Canyon and come back to you through this subcommittee with something that is different and does adhere to that requirement for the new general plan amendment that you enacted last month. So very much appreciate the commentary this evening. And we're very excited to come back to you with something that addresses some of these comments, and look forward to that early next year.
Thank you so much. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed, and this is continued until January.
January 25th was on the table, but actually, Brian, if you are still here, does that work for your team? It may be a little tight. My concern is with adding the subcommittee to the process. We also have the option of continuing it to a date uncertain. But I asked the applicant team if they think that January 25th is manageable with a subcommittee meeting, probably towards early January.
We do feel that we can hit that January 25th meeting. I would ask that the commission maybe do it to a date uncertain just to cover our bases, but our intention certainly would be to do an early meeting with the subcommittee and have time to make our revisions and get back on that January 25th meeting. That would be our desire.
I mean, it creates more work for us to renotice, but if I think my recommendation is that we do date uncertain so that we're not rushing the subcommittee process and sort of holding this applicant to a timeline that, while we may all share the same objective, may become unrealistic with the holidays and other things. So perhaps we aim for that date, but keep our options open.
And for the subcommittee, what I would like to hold you to is no more than 2 meetings. So if you think you're going to have more than 2 meetings, if you could let Director Hadwin and myself know. But hopefully you can wrap it up in 2 meetings. Okay, moving right along. Does anybody need?
Madam Chair, if I may, I would ask that you entertain a motion to continue to a date uncertain. And if you'd like to consolidate them, you could also include the motion appointing the subcommittee.
Fine. I will make that motion that we continue this to a date uncertain and that we create a subcommittee to work with the applicant on this that includes Commissioner Alain, Commissioner Miller, and Commissioner Hirschbein.
I'll second that.
Can you call the roll, please?
Who's the second on this?
I am.
Okay. Chair Warmick?
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes.
Commissioner Alain?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
and Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Approved 5 with 1 absent and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Moving right along, does anyone need a break, or Commissioner Hirschbein, do you want a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Okay. Like to reopen the meeting? If you can do that.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back. We are on item 2D, which is Anthony Hazel of Mini Decks LLC for a conditional use permit application to operate a 2,891 square foot cocktail lounge with an accessory micro distillery at 700 Union Drive, Zone C1, Section 10. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen here. Thank you. As you may recall, the Planning Commission reviewed this project last month on November 9th. And at that time, the applicant requested a continuation of the project review to reflect the most recent changes to the business proposal. And subsequently, the Planning Commission voted to continue the review to the date certain of December 14th. This is just to show what was previously proposed and what has been changed since the initial review. Initially, the applicant proposed the use of interior space only, and the project was proposing a 23 indoor seating. The image at the bottom that show the proposed revision to the initial proposal, and the proposed use now includes the use of outdoor space, which is 1,400 square feet with a 54 seats, as well as the proposed changes to the exterior of the Class 1 building to accommodate a new ADA ramp and a landing. And the business is also proposing to utilize outdoor space for occasional special events, which involves the use of sound amplification equipment. And then also the business proposing to install a custom-built trash enclosure in the rear area. These changes will not have any impact in terms of street parking requirements because of the Class 1 historic designation status. However, this special event related to parking raises a concern for potential negative impact on the traffic circulation in the neighborhood. And the implementation of a parking management plan would be appropriate for the occasional special events in the outdoor area. And with regards to outdoor amplified music, the submitted justification letter does not really provide any details with regards to the use of the sound amplification during the non-event hours. The staff like to note that all activities in the city are subject to the city's noise ordinance regulations. In the C1 zone, special events, the outdoor special events are permitted subject to a land use permit, and applicants proposes to conduct no more than 2 special events each month, which involves attendees up to 60 people. According to the fire department, though, the permitted maximum occupant load for the outdoor area is 49. And the justification letter also does not really provide the proposed hours of operation pertaining to special events. And the proposed seating arrangement actually does not meet the fire department regulation. The proposed trash enclosure, the applicant is proposing a custom-built trash enclosure, and the staff report includes an image that was submitted by the applicant. It appears that this customer-built trash enclosure does not meet the specifications of the trash enclosure design that are included in the zoning code. For these reasons, Staff is recommending the planning commission to approve the proposed project, subject to conditions of approval, which include but are not limited to the following. The requirement of a parking management plan for the proposed outdoor special events as a part of the land use permit, conformance of outdoor amplified sound music to the city's noise ordinance regulations at all times, and limit the frequency of the proposed outdoor events to twice a month as proposed, and require all outdoor special events to conclude no later than 10 p.m. Additionally, limit the number of attendees to 49 for each outdoor special event. Requirement of a trash enclosure which fully conforms to the zoning code regulations, and remove the 4-person table located near the new driveway gate to secure fire exit. And then also the proposed table arrangement to not interfere with the fire exit and shall be fire department compliant. And this concludes the staff presentation, and the staff and applicant both are available should you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff? I have one, if other people don't, which is, given the area that this is in, do you think that they can do a parking plan and find parking spaces for the outdoor special events?
The parking management plan, the applicant can come up with a creative way to address that, such as valet parking, or the business may establish a parking agreement with a different property owner, and it's really difficult for staff to determine whether it's feasible or not at this point without exploring the option. But
I would add, it's not out of the context of what we've seen in other businesses in this area. And I think to Noriko's point, they can get creative. They can provide shuttles. They can do the valet. Given that most of these events may occur in the evening hours, like Noriko was alluding to, they can come up with an agreement with their neighboring businesses that might only be open during business hours. They may do a combination of those things. So I think, the onus is really on the applicant to go through that process. But I think we've seen it done elsewhere. So if they get creative, I think they can find something.
Okay. Any other questions? There being none, the public hearing is open. The applicant has 10 minutes.
Okay, guys. So thank you for hearing us again on this issue. We want to say that the special event aspect of our business plan is not the focal point. We don't even know, whether there's going to be a demand for that, and but we certainly don't want to be limited if there is such a demand. The space itself is very well suited to noise restriction, because there's a 30-foot wall one side and a 25-foot wall the other side. There's no neighbors at the back. It's an open lot all the way to Indian, and obviously, we want to comply with all city noise ordinance, as we also want our neighbors to. We frequent those businesses ourselves, my wife and I, and we know the owners, and we want there to be mutual cooperation, and don't plan on having any live bands or any loud music that way. It's not what we're looking for. What we have focused on is the use for tourists and locals alike to be able to sit in such a beautiful setting. The view forward from that lot, it's undeveloped, is attractive, and we feel that there could be a cozy area for people to sit and enjoy a cocktail and our spirits. That's the focal point. So that's our main push on this. The trash enclosure issue, we felt that we plan a small plate offering with an emphasis on oysters in particular, an oyster bar essentially. And with that, we want to move the trash out of there much quicker than the regular pickups. And we check with Desert Disposal. They have a concierge kind of I forget what they call it, but basically they walk onto the property and they remove, if we had smaller trash cans, they get removed quickly because we don't want that potential smell, especially from seafood and so on, spoiling the whole look and feel back there. We feel that a traditional large enclosure trash area would be unsightly in that relatively small space, and that we could make something attractive that was again maintained regularly, so that that there was no issue with the trash. In other words, remove it regularly, and we just don't see that the big style trash enclosures can fit there. It can fit at the back of the property because there's utility, power, and other restrictions. So at least 7 feet, and in some places as much as 10 feet from that back wall, there's right of way for Edison and other utilities. So we felt that the trash enclosure to the right, where we positioned it, out of sight from the street, is an ideal spot for it. We just need to scale it down. So anyway, that's how we felt.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
Madam Chair, no one has signed up in advance. No one's hand is up, and no one else is in the meeting.
Thank you. Questions for you would have rebuttal time. I'm not sure you want to use that, but we may want to ask you questions while the public hearing is open. Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, question for the applicant, Tony. Tony, there's an event space to the north of you. Do you foresee any coordination with that event space as far as your use, or you're not sure of that at this point?
So our neighbor to the direct north that we share that space. No, we have no. We have no cooperation. We haven't discussed anything, but I know the owner, and again, we want, there is it's in close quarters there, so music that they have, I'd like to get together so we're all on the same page with music for one, and luckily, yeah, their music choice is quite pleasant, so I think that should be compatible. So.
Other questions?
Yeah, but open the door like the first notch.
Sorry, one more time.
The event space that you're talking about is the Flannery Exchange. Is that correct? You're next to that, close to Trios and close to Jake's, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, I had one question for you, which was usually we want to hear we want the outside music to be at a conversational level.
Absolutely.
I don't know what you were planning, but we don't want an interference with the other businesses. We want you to work nicely.
We understand that and accept that. It's for everybody's benefit. It's not we're not looking to create a carnival or a party atmosphere back there, but our business plan, it would be great not to be restricted, to be able to develop things that fit in and work with, mixers, neighborhood mixers, all kinds of things that that lend itself well to the spirits business and to the cocktail culture that we have here in Palm Springs.
Are there other questions of the applicant? I'm just wondering, where are you? I didn't understand the whole issue with the trash. Where would you have to put it if you meet the city's requirements of a normal trash enclosure? It's a very small space.
Yeah, the first suggestion was back onto the back wall, but the pad would not be able to exist there because of this utility right of way, for want of a better word. So our proposal then was to put a wall to wall that off so it was secure. Then someone in the planning department suggested that could be achieved with landscaping, which we totally, in fact, it was a great idea, and we'd like to do that, ficus or something to that effect. But that large trash enclosure encroaching into this relatively small space is we feel makes it really difficult. And again, we're trying to limit the smells, particularly with our choice of food, primarily oysters and seafood. So as you come into the space on the right-hand side, where the air conditioning unit currently is, we would make something that was good looking and would blend in to the outdoor space. And we'd use rollout bins because there's no access for the trucks to come in anyway, which is the difficulty of the spot for any business. It's just not it's not allowable. They would never fit in. So having these wheel bins brought out to the sidewalk for trash disposal is the solution anyway. There's no way to fit one of those traditional steel 4-wheel bins. And then trying to get it down the side of the building, the risk of damage to the building, which is obviously a historic building, needs to be protected. So we thought it was an ideal solution.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you. The public hearing is closed. It's before the commission. Comments and questions. I'd like to talk with staff a little bit about the trash. It sounds like what we have here is a normal situation, very tiny space. Do we have to have the large bin? Can we accommodate them, Chris?
Yeah, it is a little bit tight. I might call in Noriko. Did we look at, what alternatives might be available if they cannot comply with the city's requirements?
So the zoning code does require or provides a minimum size, particularly for recycling materials. So code requires that the size needs to be at least 3 cubic yards. So according to the Palm Springs disposal, the dimensions of this minimum 3 cubic yard will require at least 6 feet and 10 inches in width. That's just for recyclable materials only. But other than that, and then also requirement that the trash enclosure needs to be constructed with a concrete floor.
If I might, we obviously we want to comply with the concrete floor aspect and so on. As far as recyclables, I own another business not related up at the airport. I have recycling bins and trash disposal available to me and my businesses, and we'd be certainly happy to remove the recyclables to that business that I own, and we are able to dispose of them also as need be, daily if need be, and we can we really don't see that we're going to have that much, and we won't let it accumulate there. It'll be unsightly, and the same with the smell of the seafood. These are things that are beneficial to us as a business to take care of in a sensible way, and we're committed to that. So we feel, most importantly, that these proposals, although they might not be standard, suit this small space and suit this historic building and our use of it, our intended use. It fits right in.
I have to cut you off. We've really closed the public portion of this. I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm going to speak to the commission. I like this proposal. I'd really like the trash situation to be thought through and worked out in a way, if there's a possibility of doing that to accommodate. We're already accommodating a historic building on the parking. And I'm wondering if there is any way that we can accommodate them on the trash.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I might, perhaps condition of approval, planning 9, trash enclosure, perhaps we can add a sentence to the end of that if the commission wanted to, that directs staff and the applicant to work on an alternative trash plan that may be acceptable to the city and PSDS. I think our concern is the zoning code establishes certain standards, but I hear you, and I think with that language, it may enable us to find a creative solution here.
I know I've taken up the space. Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yeah, I would agree with the planning director. That would be acceptable to me.
It would be acceptable to me too. Any other issues that people want to raise with this? Commissioner Miller?
Yeah, just a comment regarding the trash and the odor potential. Way back in my career, I worked in South Florida, which was very humid and hot, and we had a lot of seafood restaurants. And one thing they did was actually refrigerate their trash areas to reduce the smell and to prolong the stops that needed to be made to pick up that trash. So I just want you to make sure you've explored that. I don't know if it would meet Title 24 energy requirements nowadays, but something at least to look into for the trash smell.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, would someone like to make a motion on this? Commissioner Land, did you have your hand up? I saw.
I did not, but I put my hand up to make a motion.
Oh, good.
Move to approve the project as conditioned with the additional language that was proposed by Director Hadlin.
I'll second.
Can we call the roll, please?
Commissioner Land?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes.
And Chair Womack?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Congratulations. I look forward to having oysters and a cocktail at your place when it opens.
We look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Commission. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no new business. Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments. I have one just to fill people in. City Council a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, reviewed. They basically were working with a problem that I think probably was an old problem, but what they did was they limited the number of times that we an architectural review committee can review a project, and that would be, they would limit us to 3 meetings. and 2 study sessions. So in terms of the amount of review that we can give, I don't remember if they counted our 2 subcommittee meetings. I don't remember if they counted the study session for a project as one of the meetings, since that's a voluntary thing that an applicant asks for.
I went back and looked at the minutes today just to be sure, and it was 3 meetings with an additional 2 study sessions and or subcommittee meetings. So the 2 outside of the 3 includes both study session and subcommittee.
So in this project, in one of the projects we had tonight that we continued, we'd already had a study session. I think continuing it tonight doesn't count as a meeting. Am I correct?
Tonight's continuance would count as one of your 3 meetings because it was a noticed public hearing. You had 1 study session.
We should have just continued it then earlier.
But the city council decision does also allow allows me the discretion. Well, sorry, I should clarify. The city manager the discretion to add an additional meeting, or their designee. I don't have clarification yet if that is me, but I imagine it may be, or with mutual agreement with the applicant. So I think on the example for tonight, we have a willing applicant who wants to work through the subcommittee process. So I don't see us running into a problem on that end, but it's good knowledge to have going forward.
But doesn't a continuation still count as a meeting?
I think if we pull it prior to it being held, it would not. If it's a noticed public hearing and it's continued, then it's a meeting.
Okay, thanks.
So it's something that we need to look at, which I just wanted to alert you as to, one, that new rule, and secondly, why it asked you to limit your study sessions on this project or your subcommittee meetings to no more than 2.
Does that include the ARC review as well? Those
No,
numbers?
ARC has the same number of reviews.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's not for a whole project, it's each board or commission.
Madam Chair, I would additionally note that under state law with certain housing projects, the city as a whole is already limited to a finite number of meetings it can hold with regard to approval of housing projects. So, this broadens it to all potential meeting items, but is substantially more liberal in the amount of meetings and committee meetings that are allowed than even state law does for housing projects. So there are some other constraints out there provided by state law as well.
Anyway, I did want to alert people to that. That is a change. And the solution is, if we can't get to resolution on something that we have to take action, which is if we haven't resolved it, to turn the project down or to approve it when we're not resolved to approve it. So there is a limitation in this project. In particular, we now count as having had 2 meetings. Are there any other Planning Commission reports, requests, or comments? The Planning Director's report.
You stole my thunder on one item, but thank you. I was going to talk about that as well, but I would like to talk about the resumption of in-person meetings. So we had sort of touched on this at a prior meeting, and I had committed to coming back with some additional information. So certainly, I believe our first meeting is, let me pull up a calendar, January 11th, and then we have a meeting January 25th. And the City Council has sort of left to the discretion of boards and commissions to resume in-person meetings should they wish to. We have the City Council chambers reserved for those meetings if the commission is interested in doing so. And we're just working through some technical aspects of making that work. They would be hybrid meetings, so we would still provide a Zoom link to the public or applicants should they wish to participate remotely, since we do want to encourage as much participation as necessary, as possible. But on the question of if we do it, is it all or nothing? Does every commissioner need to be present in person? It's a bit of a cloudy answer on that, but here's what I understand, and Attorney Priest may jump in and correct me, but I did speak with others in the city attorney's office about this earlier. I believe under the emergency order that is still in effect under the Brown Act, the answer to that is no. The commissioners would still have the option right now of joining remotely if they are unable to attend in person. What we understand is happening is that emergency order is likely to be lifted by the governor at some point this spring. And that there are other changes being made to the Brown Act that would likely require that at some point in the first half of next year, we will go back to sort of more regular rules where, quorum would need to be met in the advertised location of the meeting. But at least for January, we would probably still be able to have some kind of hybrid participation by the commission itself. I just want to pause there and make sure I didn't misspeak, Attorney Priest, from your understanding.
No, thank you, Mr. Hadwin. I think that's a fair summary.
Okay, so there will be changes as we get more into 2023, TBD on what exactly those look like, but I do understand some of the changes that will take effect in 2023 are such that we would need a quorum of the commission present at the advertised location in person. There would be exceptions made for commissioners who are ill or who have some other sort of emergent need to be absent to allow them to participate remotely. But we'll have that conversation when we have more information around that. So that's the first point to consider in returning to in-person meetings. And I thought there was a second item that we wanted to talk about. I think it's more sort of around the technology and running a hybrid meeting, but we are working through that with our IT department to make sure that we have all of the equipment set up for that. So with that, questions and ideally some direction from you all. Oh, I'm sorry. The second item was on the start time. So I know that there were questions around going back to an afternoon start time. I know that there was a discussion on that with the city council at some point in the late spring or early summer, and I don't believe a final direction was given by the city council if they were agreeable to that. So for now, the idea would be that we would be returning to staying with the 5:30 meetings. However, should this commission make a determination that they would like to go back to the afternoon meetings, I would ask that you make that direction tonight so that I can take it back through my channels and get that before the council for consideration. So those are my two items. And with that, looking for feedback and direction.
My feeling is there's too much illness right now to go back to in-person meetings. I don't know. Everybody I know has COVID, the flu, or respiratory illness, or has had it within the last couple of weeks. And so I don't see the advantage of doing it in high flu season. I don't know, do other people agree with that?
I agree.
I definitely agree.
I'm relatively indifferent.
I as well am indifferent. I mean, I'm ready whenever the majority are ready to go back to in-person. We can wear a mask if we feel more comfortable about doing that, but I think it's getting close to time. I'm going to have to retire my SpongeBob SquarePants flannel underwear, to go back into live meetings, but.
Oh no, we would invite you to wear them.
But you'll still sit behind a desk. So you'll be safe. What do people, the first question I don't think we've had the increase in public participation that people thought we would have if we had evening meetings. But we also may have members who can't do evening meetings. And I'm just thinking, Mr. Irvin, you work during the daytime, am I right? So I think for us, as long as we have members that can't do it, I think we have evening meetings. I don't, again, I'm speaking, and if anybody disagrees with me.
I personally would love to get away from meetings, but I don't think it's right to the public. Because a lot of people have work and kids and things that most of us probably are a little bit senior and don't have to worry about as much. But I think it's more responsive to the public if we meet in the evening.
The interesting thing is we had much more public participation when we met in the daytime.
Really?
It's this community, but we often had filled rooms.
Interesting.
I think just anecdotally, what I think, you're perhaps attracting different people and excluding others. So, I don't think we have perfect data on it, but I think we've heard from both sides. So, yeah. And I also just wanted to add to your point, Madam Chair. I think when the council initially gave this direction, when we started this conversation, we were at a very different point of the flu season. And I think we weren't seeing the sort of uptick that we've certainly seen in the last few weeks. So I certainly hear you that the conversation has changed.
I would like to also say, even with the participation aspect, we have been in COVID. So, a large portion of the time change, we have been restricted to our homes. So I think it might be a little premature to make the decision that we had more attendance, considering that we've been inside. Like I can say literally, I think I maybe attended 3 or 4 meetings before I'm on Zoom. So I haven't really even got to meet anyone from the Planning Commission at all. Because most of the time since my term has been on Zoom. So, I just think that we can't decide and say that, we're not getting results with the evening just because of what happened. That was out of any of our control.
Yeah, no, it was, we probably had four meetings before COVID became an issue between the time that the council asked us to go to evenings. So I think it's only been 3 years.
Well, another interesting point on that Commissioner Irvin's comments made me think of is, we host this Zoom meeting and certainly people can participate that way, but PSCTV, you know what I'm trying to say, also broadcasts these meetings. And so there may be a whole subset of people that are watching but not engaging that we're just not even aware of.
So the decision is that we don't go back to in-house meetings right now while we're still in the middle of a season of illness, and that we look at doing this when flu, RSV, the combination of flu, RSV, and COVID quiets down, which and I think it is still good to allow people who are sick or traveling, if it's at all possible, to participate in the meetings, for commissioners to participate. If council and the governor will allow that in the future, I do think that it's good to let that, to broaden it in the way that they have with council, where they meet in person, but people may not be meeting in person if they can't.
And we can get clarity on what, the future changes to the Brown Act would entail for that. I'm not up to date on those tonight, but I can give you clarity so we know what we're looking ahead to.
Is there security at City Hall? On when there aren't council meetings, is it a safe?
When there are not council meetings, I'm not aware of seeing security, but we certainly have security available for meetings.
You know, if it's just us in city council chambers, that's also another consideration.
Mm-hmm. I can get some clarity on that, how that would work if we were to come back or when we come back. Okay, thank you for the direction. If there's nothing else on that, the only other update I had, I don't believe I gave this at the last meeting, but the amendments to the childcare, the sections of the zoning code were approved by the city council, you know, as presented from the planning commission. So that's good news. So it is now easier to have a childcare facility in Palm Springs.
And the Dream Hotel?
Yes, thank you. So the Dream Hotel was continued by the city council. So it was to be heard last week. And I think because there were sort of parallel conversations going on around the planning entitlements, as well as the operations and management agreement between the city and the hotel operator, and those conversations were still underway, it was decided to continue our conversation on the planning side until such time that both of those items can be heard concurrently. So it is tentatively scheduled for, or I shouldn't say tentatively, it would continue to date certain of February 23rd. So it will return to the city council in late February. That's all I have.
So with that, I will adjourn our meeting until January 11th, 2023 in the new year. I wish all of you a happy holiday season and a very happy new year, and see you next year.
Yes, happy holiday. Goodbye.